Hello, I'm Tom Gensel, PSBA's Executive Director. This has been a tough year for school district budgets. A survey back in the spring showed that 2/3 of all school districts needed to either eliminate educational programs and/or eliminate staffing positions in order to balance their budgets for this year. But somehow boards managed to do that, and budgets for every school district are now in place. And state government adopted its budget too. But that story really isn't over. Let me just explain. The governor, back in February, proposed an increase of $354 million in the basic instructional subsidy. This was the latest installment in an effort over several years to have the state pay its fair share of the cost of education, as called for in something known as the costing out study that had been commissioned by the legislature. So a series of increases in state funding over time to get the state to the right level. It took $354 million to do that this year. But when the budget negotiations between the governor and the legislative leaders were done, that increase was down to $250 million. But that budget that finally came out of those negotiations in the Capitol also included an assumption of millions, actually hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding that were not certain. As a matter of fact, when the budget was finally approved in July, it wasn't even clear whether Congress was going to appropriate funding for Medicaid. These FMAP funds ultimately were approved by Congress, but not at the level that the state legislature and the governor had assumed in the budget would be coming. So this means that the 2010-11 state budget now has a hole in it, and they have to go back, the legislature and the governor, and figure out how to close that gap. There are a lot of ideas floating around, but a couple of them will affect school districts directly. One is to further reduce that increase in the basic subsidy. They're talking about a $200 million increase, again down from the $354 million that was originally proposed, and across the board cuts in various state government programs, including education programs. So if these things happen, they will affect school district budgets, which already assumed a lot of these funds would be forthcoming. Now, there are some other developments that are taking place as this is being taped that I think are important to be thinking about. Congress also approved a separate bill on education jobs, and this will bring additional money into Pennsylvania to create instructional positions and in some administrative supervisory positions, and to help school districts avoid layoffs. How those dollars are going to be distributed and the limitations on their use are all things that we're still trying to understand, and we'll be reporting to you through our website and our publications. And another development that took place was a vote by the School Retirement Board, the PSBA board, to reduce the contribution rate to the retirement system for this year from the amount that was previously certified. It's still more than last year's, but not as much as was originally projected. So in a way, you could say that's short-term relief for school districts. Our concern, of course, is that that digs the hole even deeper for the retirement system. It means less money going in, and it compounds the underfunding of the retirement program. So, what's the bottom line for school boards? Well, we think it's simply to be cautious, to not commit to new funding programs, and particularly expenses that are likely to increase over time. Next year's state budget, we expect, is going to be even more difficult than this year's, as federal stimulus money and other dollars go away, and as the retirement costs increase significantly. And of course, as local school board members know, all of this is happening at a time that local tax revenues are declining as well. Now, your association is working hard to help school districts through this difficult period. We are the only organization that has introduced legislation to structurally change the retirement system, the PSBA program for future school employees, to help contain costs, to assist school boards and ultimately taxpayers. And PSBA has drafted and introduced a whole series of mandate relief bills to try to cut down on the costs imposed by state government on school districts. But let me close with this request. This is a critically important time for school board members to be effective advocates for public education. You really need to be talking with legislators about how all of these decisions affect your school district, your programs, and your students. And you have an opportunity as members of PSBA to help shape our advocacy agenda. At the School Leadership Conference in October in Hershey, we hold our annual Legislative Policy Council meeting where we actually adopt our platform for next year. And every member school entity, school districts, intermediate units, and career and technical schools are entitled to send delegates to that meeting. I encourage you and request you to make sure that your school entity is fully represented at that meeting. There's a lot happening. I'll be talking with you again soon, and we encourage you to check our website on a regular basis for updates on these and other developments. I'm Tom Gensel, and I'm working for you.